Welcome to Centered.Live, real conversations about what grounds us, what lifts us, and helps give us purpose in life, which gives us clarity and compassion. So, Paul Maloy, next.
Your hosts are Randy Burgoyne and Paul Maloy, husbands, fathers, grandfathers, and men of tremendous experience and faith. Our topic tonight, getting unstuck from a muddled life.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Tell me what you mean about muddled. What is muddled?
I know it's kind of an old word, isn't it? Muddled, but certainly thinking about the idea that it's not great, it's not terrible, but you're just sort of in a quagmire. How about that for a word, huh?
Okay.
Not quicksand, but you're stuck in a situation that you seemingly cannot move forward, and it's not going where you want it to go. So a muddled life.
I think every one of us at some point has some sort of stuck attitude where we feel like we can't get out of it, whether it's a career or a relationship that's really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there was a study that was done a few years ago by a man by the name of Dr. Adam Alter of New York University. And so this has been a few years ago, but it's still fairly recent. In fact, he just recently published a book called Anatomy of a Breakthrough. And his study reached out to literally thousands of people around the world. And his question was, do you feel stuck in life? And what the response was is that within 10 to 15 seconds, almost everybody was already typing a response. So this is, a very common feeling for people, is that, they're stuck. And so 99% of the respondents said that they felt stuck in an area of life. So You're right, Randy. I mean, truly, most people are, in fact, going to be feeling stuck somehow. And so then it begs the question, well, then how do we get unstuck? How do we get out of that scenario that we find ourselves not enjoying where we are, right? So that follow-up question from, who gets stuck? The answer is just about everybody. And certainly everyone at some point in their life, I think, would honestly have to say that they've been stuck. But the second question is why? Why do we get stuck? And what do you think? What ideas do you have?
Well, I think that maybe part of it is that we start out getting comfortable in our situation. Our surroundings get familiar. We get into a routine.
Right.
And then all of a sudden that little creative side of us goes, oh, yeah, I'd like to do something else. That gnawing that I get every 3 years to change careers or something.
It's funny that you should say that, because, of course, you and I, we've known each other for, 40 years plus. And I know, of course, that you have had a lot of jobs. I actually counted my jobs for some kind of a project, or maybe I was doing it for my students at some point recently. And I counted that I'd had, from the time I was 12, old enough to earn money, right? So a job. I was an employee somewhere, somehow, doing something, right? I've had 35 different jobs. I know, wow. Right? And certainly some of those went by pretty fast. But I often wonder, well, okay, I know that I was with Novell for 4 years. I was with Burgoyne Computers for 4 years. I was a teacher for 16. So that means that a lot of those, went by pretty fast. So was that wanderlust, that was kind of driving me to see what else was out there? A fear of maybe getting stuck? I'll tell you honestly, as a teacher, I never felt like I was stuck. I always loved what I was doing, and the kids that I was working with, and certainly my peers, my teacher and administrator friends. But still, you're not wrong when you say that it's getting comfortable, and pretty soon we we get confronted with maybe a problem or a challenge, and it may initially seem insurmountable. Um, and then from there, we almost become paralyzed or immobilized, at least through anxiety, through fear, um, and if not that, certainly worry. So, have you ever had that in your life? Have you ever experienced that?
Oh yeah. Now sometimes there's situations where I've been sad and depressed, feel like I'm stuck in a rut. There's
Yeah.
also been cases where it's almost like a PTSD. Like
Mm.
about 10 years ago, I hit a girl on rollerblades, and she was in a crosswalk,
Oh, yikes!
and she broke her leg. She had some road rash. Other than that, she was fine. But I wasn't prepared for the anxiety, the stress that occurred after. All the what ifs
Right,
came rushing into my
right.
brain
Yeah.
and immobilized me. And actually, it was a good thing my insurance company saw the claim and sent and had a psychiatrist give me a call on the phone.
Oh, interesting.
And we had some. He was in a different city, um, and we had weekly chats on how to handle this
Interesting.
kind of anxiety.
Yeah.
And it was an outlet. Maybe it was a way of speaking to somebody that wasn't so close to me that I felt inhibited,
Right.
but it really helped to get that out of my system. Now, it didn't totally solve the anxiety that came along with that, but having that help, having that outside person come in and help me extract it. Now, he didn't do it for me. He helped me
Right.
extract
Right.
that anxiety and address it and take it into uh, a new area where I could live, I could survive.
Well, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because actually one of the things that we're going to discuss a little bit in a few minutes is the idea that we really can't typically we cannot get ourselves unstuck. We absolutely benefit from having somebody else help us, and
Hmm.
uh, almost always we need that external, whether it's a perspective thing, or whether it's somebody that has the ability to kind of kick us in the rear end, motivate us in some way, to get us moving forward, and then also be able to stick with us um, when we need it. And I'm going to share back more about that in just a moment. But okay, so of course, I've definitely had times when I have felt stuck, and sometimes I think that it doesn't have to be the entirety of your life. It can be just one area of your life where you're feeling stuck.
Hmm.
And so, like you said, that scenario that brought on some kind of PTSD like stress in your life probably didn't shut down everything that you were doing in your life, but it certainly had an impact at some level. Kind of, maybe it was just always there, but you were able to function in a lot of other areas, even as you were trying to deal with that particular situation. How would you say um, that most um, professionals would say, there are good ways to get unstuck? what comes to your mind?
Well, first of all, I think that we have to recognize it. I mean, it's kind of like
Yeah.
the 12-step and double A approach. First recognize you're an alcoholic. First, recognize that you're stuck, that you've got
Yeah.
that issue that you
Right.
um, have to address. And second is being able to reach out to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
get out to get some external help, like we talked about, and then be willing to make some changes.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
that can be a real difficult thing if we're stuck in a particular situation to be able to make some of those changes to move forward. And I think if we're stuck enough, if we're down in the dumps enough, that we're more likely to make those changes necessary than if we're kind of comfortable, kind of not, in a comfortable mud.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is completely possible for you to become so climatized or acclimated, if you will, to your situation that you just get okay with being stuck. And there are people who are generally in that frame of mind. To make a change, then I think takes a lot of courage. And I also
Mm-hmm.
think that there has to come with that courage a fair amount of patience with yourself, which typically for me, I am so often impatient with myself. I'm more patient with others, generally speaking, than I am with myself. And what I've learned over the many years is that to be patient sometimes takes a lot of courage, which you wouldn't normally think of those two things as going together. And yet, really and truly, to be patient with others, to be patient with yourself, I think takes a certain amount of courage. Okay. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention next that I've had a thought that um, as you're starting to make changes, a lot of people think that they have to make this
Right.
gigantic step forward,
Exactly.
but you can take it a little at a time. Instead of just drastically changing careers, keep your current job, start looking at what you can do, maybe shape your time in your evening time to be able to spend more time learning instead of
Yep.
doom scrolling.
Reskill
Right,
or build a skill.
right. Yep.
Right.
Take some little steps forward, and once you
Yeah,
have some little progress, and you see that, then you're
exactly.
motivated to move on. Right.
Exactly. And that's what most experts say is that, don't tackle the big whatever it is that's in front of you, whittle it down, create these little things that are doable, and then actually work on that. And when you achieve that little thing, then absolutely, it's worth to celebrate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you'll remember that there was a great movie called What About Bob?
Oh
Uh,
yeah, Bill
right?
Murray. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the whole premise of that movie was that he needed a psychiatrist to help him to succeed in his life. And the most fundamental uh, advice or counsel was just take baby steps. And even though that was a tremendously funny and just a very entertaining movie, that doesn't mean that the baby step concept is not true. And it definitely comes into play when we're trying to get unstuck. And it's like, okay, we know that there is something that we want to accomplish, some way to make a change, but because the change is big and formidable, we sometimes never make the effort without understanding that a little thing here and a little thing here and a little thing here and a little thing here eventually get you there. Let me give you a historical reference real quick. When Lewis and Clark were making their great trek to try to find the transoceanic riverway that theoretically was supposed to link the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Oceans together, they eventually acquired a guide who was either Sacagawea or Sacagawea, depending on how different people
Mhm.
pronounce it. And they got to a point to where they were able to barter for horses from her home tribe. And when they said, "Well, how much further is the Pacific Ocean?" They said, "Oh, it's like 3 mountain ranges over." They were at the base of the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. And in their records, they talk about when they got up to the top of the mountain of the first range, all they could see was range after range after range. And in fact, the Rocky Mountain range is full of something like, I don't remember now, 17, 18, 19, or 20 mountain ranges all smushed together, right?
Mhm.
And immediately they were disheartened. But the reality is that they kept plodding forward one step at a time. And when you add up the billion steps, they ended up at the Pacific Ocean up there in the Seattle area.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
sometimes we just forget the power of a step, the power of something little that can be accomplished. And each night, they would camp and they would note in their journals or in a logbook, how far they had come based on their steps. And every night, they had made progress. And sometimes we forget that little but consistent little ultimately yields big rewards. So here's another thing then that a lot of times people forget, and we've alluded to it a little bit here, and that is that you have to believe in your goal, you have to believe in yourself, and so a lot of times, it needs some analysis. We need to take the time. We need to. I have a friend, a dear friend, who always tells me slow down to go fast, and I forget that,
Mhm.
and so he has to tell me quite frequently, slow it down so that you can really be effective in what you're trying to accomplish, and you'll find out that you're going faster than you would if you were just kind of like running around helter skelter, hair on fire kind of a thing, right? So it 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 there's value in taking some time to pause and say, all right, what are my strengths, what are my um, sometimes we would say weaknesses, but what are our growth opportunities? And then
Yeah.
what are our hopes? What are our goals? And the more specific that we can calibrate those goals to our strengths and recognizing that, yes, we still have growth opportunities, we absolutely can succeed at that big goal. But again, you set those smaller way stations along the way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And years ago, in another career, we had a professional come in and do a SWOT analysis: strengths,
Well,
weaknesses,
there you go.
opportunities,
Yeah, I was
threats.
just going
Right.
to say, tell us what SWOT is. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was really an eye-opening event, because I'm thinking, oh yeah, there's another corporate training, and here we go on setting goals, and but going through the process was really helpful to look down and say, okay, as an individual, what are my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? As a team, as a company, and help us expand it. And then we were able to create a company vision that we all enrolled in. And that's just an incredible environment. And in essence, we need to kind of do that on our own selves, our own mind, to be able to have those kind of goals and objectives. Um, and and it gets belief in yourself that you can do it. And a lot of it, Zig Ziglar was right. We have to practice positivity every day.
Yes. Yes. And when we are in some kind of a funk, it is so important to have a resource that we can reach out to and call for help. The
Hmm.
helpline, right? The game show, do you want to call somebody for help? Right? And I used to actually do that with my students in class. If somebody didn't know the answer, I said, do you want to call for a helpline? Do you want somebody else in the class to help you out with that so that they don't, get stuck, right? I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek. And one of the things that he talks about is how important it is to have a friend that you can call and ask for 8 minutes. Very specifically, he says, if somebody calls him and says, do you have 8 minutes? It's a cry for help. And he says they keep it to 8 minutes. But the point is that then he is able to hear what the other person is struggling with and not necessarily solve the problem, but just to listen, just to say, I am here for you. What can I do to help if that's what you're asking for, right? But I love the idea. And I've actually instituted that a little bit with my children and with my siblings. It's like, if I'm feeling that I'm struggling, I may text out. I say, anybody got 8 minutes? Kind of a thing. So what I'd like to do, Randy, because I know that we're running short on time here, is that I'd like to wrap everything up with our recommendations. So when we think about getting unstuck, first step probably is to analyze yourself. And notice that these all start with the letter A. So that means, again, SWOT as you defined it, but know what your strengths, your growth opportunities, and your hopes are, right? Second is you may have to adjust your attitude, adjust your patterns. So adjust them as needed. And it's really a good idea to doubt your doubts before you doubt your beliefs. But at the same time, if as you're making your way through the muddy middle of, this process, which is another friend of mine that talks about, we're almost always in a muddy middle. But the thing is that as we're in that process, if we realize that I'm going down the wrong path, we need to be ready and able to pivot and make a course correction. So the other thing is that we need to act with confidence, because all of the analysis, all of the adjusting of attitude has no value if we're not willing to act. So we want to act with confidence. We want to, do our very best, of course. And if that means we fake it until we make it, that's okay. That actually works. That absolutely works. But that's where we want to set those reasonable goals. That's where we want to be those consistent baby steps, right? Act with confidence. And then what's going to happen is we're going to start accomplishing, right? So this is 4, is that we're going to accomplish our goals and we're going to celebrate every single accomplishment. Now, that doesn't mean that every accomplishment is going to be a success. In fact, studies show that we tend to fail, which is interesting. This is really, really interesting. We tend to fail 1 time out of 6 efforts. Almost always as humans, we think we fail 5 out of 6, but that's not true. The reality is we only fail once out of 6, but it's such a problem that we get stuck on, right? Stuck in the middle, muddy middle, muddled life, that we struggle then to be able to see everything in positive. Well, okay, so growth mindset says celebrate your failure or the mistake or the thing that you learned through whatever it is that happened, that you didn't achieve what you wanted, but you learned something through that process. So you're going to celebrate those mistakes. You're going to celebrate where you fell down, and sometimes that fell down is like a body slam, right? I mean, it hurts, but you're going to celebrate that because you now know better how to handle that scenario if it comes up again. But then, of course, you're also going to celebrate every single success. And that, of course, is a phenomenal way to develop a growth mindset that we had talked about earlier. So I think that's a pretty good set of ways to work through when you feel like you are stuck in a muddled life and you want to go forward. not exactly sure how to maybe get yourself out of that rut, get yourself out of that mud pit. And yet, if you're willing, I guarantee it can be done.
Great. Yep. And I think that we always need to keep in the back of our minds the spiritual aspect.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that pray. They have a higher power that they are seeking guidance from. And that can be a really powerful influence, a force in your life to keep
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
momentum going. And so often I think we forget that. Even those of us that are, that are active in our Christian faith, there are so many times that we just think that we're relying on our own strength when we could have a little deity help.
Absolutely. We've all
So
been
thanks,
blessed.
Paul. Yeah,
Yeah, you're welcome.
thanks for that. And we're going to have some more episodes coming up soon. So be sure to subscribe and like our videos wherever you see them. And remember, these are real conversations about what grounds us and lifts us and helps us to live with purpose and clarity. So thanks, Paul. Any last words?
No, I think the main thing is to smile and attack every day as best as you can.
Great. Until next time, here's Paul and Randy.
Okay.